Okay, today we're going to be talking about rounding decimals, but before we do that, I just want to do a bit of a review on how to round just any number, even a whole number. So recently we've been rounding whole numbers, so let me just write one down. Let's say it's the number 528. Now, if we want to round, you're going to notice that the textbook or myself, I'll be asking you to round to a specific place value. So let's say I'm saying round to the nearest the nearest hundred, while the 5 is in the hundreds place value. So what I'm going to do is for the first example is draw a number line associated with the number 528. I know that 528 is between two numbers. It's between 500 and 600. Because I'm dealing with the hundreds place value, my increment is 100, right? So 500 all the way, adding 100 goes all the way up to 600. The midway point would be 550. Okay, so I have to think about, where does 528 belong? Well, I would guess that it's somewhere around, here. So therefore, if I would round 528 to the nearest 100, we would say it would round to 500, not 600. Okay. In this same example, let's say that we're rounding to the nearest tens. So that would be the 2. Well, I know that my beginning of my number line would be 520. And remember, we're dealing with tens. So I would add 10 to 520 and I would get 530. And what's in between? Well, that would be 525. So where does 528 belong on this new number line? So let me just draw that number line right here. Well, I would say that it's past the halfway point, right? So 28 is going to be closer to up here. So if I was rounding 528 to the nearest tens, well, I would be calling it 530 because it's closer to that. So we're going to now apply this knowledge to decimals. Now, actually, maybe before that, let's just take a look at that shortcut that I've worked with you. So 528. Now that you know how rounding works and what you're really doing with it, there is a shortcut. So let's round to the nearest 100. That's the 5. If you just look over at the next place value to the right, you just have to think, okay, well, if that number is between 0 and 4, it stays the same. Okay, so the 5 would stay the same. If this number beside it is the number 5 all the way up to 9, well, then you're going to round up. So when I look at the 5, rounding to the hundreds, I look next to it, now we have a 2. Is that between 0 and 4? Yes. So the 5 will stay the same and everything else turns into zeros. So 528 with that little trick turns into 500. Now let's just apply the same thing. So I'll write that again, 528. Let's round to the nearest tens. There it is. Look next to it. That's an 8. Is it between 0 and 4 or 5 and 9? It's between 5 and 9, so you round up. That 2 turns into a 3, and then the 8 turns into a 0. So those are the same results we got before, but now that you know what you're really doing, you can use this trick. Now let's talk about rounding decimals. So I'm just going to write a decimal here. So this decimal has 3 place values. We have the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay, so don't forget when you read this, you read the whole number here at the end and then say the last decimal place. So this would be 732 thousandths. So let's round this number to the nearest tenth. So we know that the nearest tenth would be the 7. The 7 is in the tenth place value. Using that trick, we can look over to the 3. Is that between 0 and 4? Or 5 and 9? It's between 0 and 4, so the 7 stays the same. And then we can place the 0 and the decimal. Now, with rounding with decimals, you actually would not bring the zeros down because when you're rounding to the 10th, the only number or only place value you're including is just the 10th. So rounding to the nearest 10th would actually just be 0.7. Now let's round this number to the nearest hundredth. So the hundredth is the 3. If we look next to it, you have a 2. 2 is between 0 and 4, so that 3 stays the same. So does the 7, and so does the decimal, and 0. So rounding to the nearest hundredth would actually be 73 hundredths. And you do not include the 0 for the thousandth. It should end as a hundredth if you're rounding to the hundredth. Now let's go ahead and try this out with a couple more examples. We're going to round this decimal 847 thousandths. First to the nearest tenth. Well, I look at the 8, that's the tenth. I look beside it, which is a 4. That's between 0 and 4, so the 8 stays the same. So rounding that to the nearest tenth would be 8 tenths. Let's round to the nearest hundredth. Okay, the 4 is in the hundredth. I look over to the right. I see a 7. That is between 5 and 9, so I have to round up. The 4 doesn't stay the same. It turns into a 5, and then you just go ahead and write the rest of it there. So that's 85 hundredths. Now, if we rounded to the nearest thousandths, well, this one wouldn't really work because there's nothing in the 10 thousandths place value. So for a number in the thousandths, you're mostly going to be dealing with rounding to the nearest tenth and the nearest hundredth.